just when I thought things were gonna get easier, they don't. I already knew I had a lot to do. And then I realized, you know what? Let me keep going back in my little book here just to make sure I am not missing a review. And I was. Let me breathe. Today's book is A Cry in the Night by Mary Higgins Clark. I just kind of felt like getting a little nostalgic and rereading some of the books that I loved as a child, which I think I've said in at least one other review that I was reading Mary Higgins Clark when I was like 10. Probably not the best reading material for a 10-year-old because I think simultaneously I was also reading Nancy Drew and the Boxcar Children. Very varied. I wanted to know what I thought. Did I still love them? And so far, I've done Where Are the Children, which I did not love as much as it was one of my absolute favorites. Didn't love Where Are the Children as much as I used to. A Cry in the Night, I'm split down the middle. As a book, actually, I thought it was good. Her writing is definitely a sign of the times. It was difficult to read because it felt so simplistic at times, and I really just wanted her to dig a little deeper. But in terms of story and the potential, if she had been writing these in a different age, then it was a really good book. With that said, I liked the idea. I liked the potential. I kind of liked just the basic premise of the novel. It's just the execution. It was very 90s. Anyways, so A Cry in the Night. We have a couple of characters. Jenny is our main character. She has an ex-husband named Kevin. She has two daughters, Tina and Beth, and then she meets this other guy named Erich Krueger at the very beginning of the novel. So just to set that stage. So we open up with her. She works for an art gallery. They are super excited because this new star, Erich Krueger, is coming. She lives in New York. He's coming to New York. He has this new exhibit, specifically Memory of Caroline. It is a painting of his mother, Caroline, who also had been an artist. However, she hadn't been a very good artist, but his grandfather, Caroline's father, also was an artist of note. So anyways, he has just emerged on this scene. Actually, that's not entirely true. That's not really where we open. We open about a year earlier, where Caroline is trying to reach Erich's cabin in the woods, the cabin where he goes to paint. He is from Minnesota, I believe, and so she's out there in the wilderness skiing through the flatlands trying to find this cabin. When she does find it, she finds something horrific, and now she is taking this painting back with her to prove something. We don't know. All we know is what she found was absolutely horrific. Now we are flashing forward to the previous year, and she is meeting Erich. Her marriage to Kevin wasn't healthy because he wasn't a good husband. He wasn't a good father. Now that they are divorced, she can't seem to get rid of him. He's always coming to her for money. He's a struggling actor. He doesn't have much to do with their children, and she is struggling financially. What we see here is, first off, she bears a striking resemblance to Caroline, which naturally catches Erich's eye. They have a little bit of a connection, although she doesn't think he's interested. I think they do lunch or something, and then later at the actual exhibit, he doesn't pay much attention to her, and she is like, oh, he must not actually be interested. Besides, I think he was hanging out with some other woman. She leaves because it's time to pick up her kids. She ends up being slightly late, and the woman who takes care of her kids has said, I don't want to do this anymore. You're late. This was your last shot. So she has no way to get home. So she's like, okay, I think she missed her bus. So she's like, yeah, we're just gonna walk X number of blocks back to our apartment. And who do you think followed her? Erich. So Erich, who is very, very wealthy, brings them home. I think it's this night. Things happened super, super quickly in this novel. I think it's that night. He's like, yeah, let's have dinner. Maybe it was the next night. It doesn't really matter. But she's like, I don't have anything. I don't have much money. Okay, so they go to the grocery store. She makes meatloaf or something. Kevin comes over and he's like, oh, hey, because it was payday. So he always shows up on payday, and she gives him some money, and Erich is not happy about that. And the fact that Kevin also touched the food, not happy about that. So he just throws the food out, and she's like, I don't have the money for you to throw out good food. And he's like, don't worry about it. They start dating, and he proposes after a week. So that's what I'm saying is there are really good bones here, but not a lot of time for development. Like, Erich is honestly a really good character. The things that Clark has happen in this novel are truly creepy, but they just happen so quick, and we don't have a whole lot of scene that it just made it hard for me to really get into it and understand the characters' actions and motivations. I felt like Jenny was so meek. She had no personality, no backbone. And true, getting into this relationship with Erich so fast could be seeking validation, could be she didn't feel loved, could be, oh, she was in some sort of an abusive relationship with another man, and oh my gosh, this dude's love bombing me, before love bombing was a term. If you look at it like that, all of her behaviors absolutely make sense, but in context of the novel, it's just like she just goes along with everything. So anyways, he proposes after a week. I think they get married after a month. And Erich, he loves how much she looks like his mother. He cannot stop talking about how beautiful she is and how much she looks like his mom. And he's kind of obsessed with her kids, and he wants to adopt them. The next thing you know, he's coming to her and he's saying, yeah, Kevin gave up his rights. We're gonna get this done. Turns out he paid Kevin, which we'll get into, maybe we'll get into that later. So at some point, Kevin starts to change his mind about that. He starts to cause some trouble because he keeps reappearing in her life. The same day that they get married, they move to Minnesota. I'm just saying, his fixation with his mother is one for the history books. Like, it is absolutely disgusting, but it is what makes this novel so great. I just wish we had time to dive into it, to really have Jenny be like, what is happening? To really get into the why behind his fixation and his behaviors. Instead, it's just creepy and gross, but we don't have any depth to it. When she arrives at this house, I mean, it's a grand estate, and she's really impressed. But nothing has changed since the day his mother died. And his mother died when he was 10. He's probably mid-20s to 30s at this point. I can't exactly remember. So it's been 20 odd years since she died, and nothing in the house has changed. Not even his childhood bedroom. He shows it to Jenny, and she's expecting to see, I don't know, kind of grown man things maybe, or at least teenage things. No, it looks exactly as it had when he was 10 years old. Right off the bat, we are seeing not all is right in the state of Denmark. Additionally, Erich says that he never even slept in his childhood bedroom after she died, which, a little early spoiler, not really, but for some context, he was present when his mother died. There had been an accident because it's a working farm of sorts. There had been an accident in the barn. She had been electrocuted, so he was there. So that makes absolute sense. Witness your mother's death. Let's not go back into that room. Too much drama. Anywho, he doesn't seem to have any problem moving him and his wife into his parents' room, though, which I thought was a little bit strange. Although right away, Jenny starts to notice Erich's behavior towards the staff, particularly this one guy, Joe. I couldn't figure out if Joe was slow or not. He seems to be a bit childlike, and he takes the verbal abuse all the time without argument. And there's all these other instances where I'm like, is he in compos mentis adult? I don't know. But she's just like, oh, well, maybe he's just tired. And the next thing that she notices is it is their wedding night. She has bought this lingerie set for their wedding night. But you know what he wants her to wear? his mother's nightgown. And over the course of her experience, she comes to the realization that he will only sleep with her when she's wearing this nightgown. So yeah, like we're getting into really creepy territory, which, oh, so creepy in a good psychological thriller way, which she's queen of suspense, but there's just no development. Before the night, though, we do also meet a new character named Mark, who is Erich's best friend from childhood. Mark's dad had also had connections to the family. I believe he was Erich, who Erich's dad's actually also called Erich, but I think they call him John. But all the men in the family are named the same thing. So I think they had been best friends. So there are strong ties there, and Mark is a vet. And I believe Mark gives him some kind of upsetting news about his horse or something like that. We also have Jenny unpacking the girls' stuff and leaves the room kind of a mess, which Erich has to set right before they go to bed. So I mean, all these things are just little annoyances to Jenny, but she's willing to let it go because they're in a new place, they're in Erich's house, they're getting to know each other, but she's just noticing little eccentricities of his. Erich also really likes to hear her say that she loves him and will never leave him. So we're having good character build-up, but without this kind of foundation and time to focus and develop, it just felt repetitious and annoying. So they go to bed, they do the thing, she wakes up and he's gone. And she's like, what happened? She walks past his childhood bedroom to go see the girls, and she notices that his bed has been slept in. He later then accuses the girls of sleeping in his room, and she's like, I wonder why I never thought of that. Well, a little bit of spoiler here. Yeah, he was the one sleeping in his own room, which it was never addressed. She eventually acknowledges the fact that he's in his room. She will come into his room while he's sleeping in the bed and, touch his forehead or something. So I'm like, why did we never address the fact that he accused your girls of doing something that he did? That could have been a really interesting moment as well. But anyways, yeah, these are just all these little things that are building up to something bigger. The next character we meet is Rooney. Rooney is weird. Rooney, it's like she went crazy. She does have a daughter, or did have a daughter named Arden, who she hasn't seen in many, many years. And she says that Arden is actually in New York. And she's kind of like, do you know Arden? But Rooney used to work for the family as well. I was confused as to Rooney's mental state. I was confused as to why she's still around. I was confused to the part that she is playing, not necessarily in the story, because she's kind of in and out and here and there, and she kind of helps create red herrings. So I understood her part in the story, why she's being kept around the house. I don't know why she's able to come into the house. I don't know, because she had been let go at some point, except for the fact that she might not be all there mentally. If Erich is so strict about his staff, why is this slipping past him? We meet Rooney because Jenny had taken the girls out. Before she had left, she had encountered the housekeeper, who I believe her name is Elsa, and Elsa had mentioned some kind of a dirt spot on the wallpaper. I don't think she was accusing the girls of doing it, but it was something about the wallpaper and the dirt and Erich and whatever. So Jenny and the girls come back to the house to hear Erich yelling at Elsa, and it's not even a big deal, but Elsa eventually cows down. She's like, I'm sorry, I must have been mistaken, it wasn't you. And Erich then gets it re-wallpapered, and it was such a minor thing that the guy who re-wallpapered it was like, are you sure you want to do this? Anyways, so Jenny, they witness that, and she's like, let's step back out and then come back in so he knows that we're here. In general, Erich spends most of his time working at the cabin. He has told the town that Jenny is a widow versus a divorcee because It's supposed to protect her reputation. He does not actually take her into town very much. She's very isolated. They do go to church once. There is an evening in which Jenny and Erich are sitting around and he tells her how his mother died and how she died on his 10th birthday. There's something about a hockey stick. Frankly, I could not understand the significance of this hockey stick. It is there, it is present, it was a gift, but other than that, I'm like, why does this hockey stick matter? Eventually, Kevin reaches out, and as I said, he is a struggling actor, and he's like, oh my gosh, I think I have an opportunity to be in some kind of production over where you are. Isn't that great? And she's like, no, leave me alone. He will not leave her alone, so she meets him at a local restaurant. She tries to do it somewhere where nobody will see them, will recognize them, where it will be a big deal, how it can get back to Erich. Erich is also out of town at this point, so he's never gonna know. Kevin makes a big deal out of things. He's like, I want the girls back. I want custody of the girls. Erich coerced me out of my rights. And she puts her foot down and she's like, look, leave me alone. I want nothing to do with you. You are not the girl's father anymore. You didn't want anything to do with them before I married Erich, so leave us alone. So then she goes home and he goes his separate way. All at once, Erich is going out of town and his birthday is coming up. Jenny wants to have a little dinner party with herself, Erich, Mark, and then his girlfriend / date, whatever she is at that point. Mark tells her it might not be the best idea. Nothing really comes to fruition until Erich's birthday, at which point Mark is like, look, this is also the anniversary of Caroline's death. He's a bit touchy about that. Still, it might not be the best time, although they do actually around this time have a dinner date. Before all of that, Jenny learns a little bit more information regarding Erich's family's history. One, Erich's parents were divorcing. Caroline was leaving, and she was actually physically leaving the very day that she died, and Mark's dad was supposed to be taking her to the airport, which obviously this could shed a whole lot of light on Erich's behaviors and his attachment to Caroline. But that's only an inference. Around the same time, Jenny's like, I think she had talked to somebody about, it might have been Rooney, it could have been Joe's mom, because Joe's mom is in and out of the mix. Somebody talks to her about how Caroline once tried to change things around the house, so she's like, okay, let me do it, because I think we can make things better. She makes the changes. Erich sees them. I mean, he doesn't say he likes them. He doesn't say he doesn't like them. He's just like, oh, I'm going to think about it. The next thing you know, he has changed everything back, and he tells her, I don't want you to do any more changes without running it by me first. The little dinner party happens. I absolutely must have missed this part. But, so I think her name is Emily. It doesn't matter what the girlfriend's name is, but all Jenny wants is for this dinner to go well, because he knows that Mark's girlfriend is going to relay everything about her to the women of the town. And so she doesn't want anything to happen that Emily could take to the town to make Jenny look bad. Well, things happen which definitely don't go the way that Jenny wants, but in particular, they're talking about how good the meal is, and they're having steak. What I missed was Erich is talking about how it's actually from a young steer, a calf, on their own farm. And it's, I guess, when they had first arrived, at some point, Jenny had made some kind of a mention regarding killing the cows or eating the cattle or something that ties her emotionally to these animals, and just the idea of harming them is not ideal to her. And so he looks to her and he's like, oh yeah, this is the little baby calf that you loved so much, something along those lines. And she's just like, I'm not gonna eat this anymore. And like, again, we get all these really great things to characterize Erich and to really develop him into some psychopath or sociopath or whatever he might turn out to be. But I'm like, where I don't remember the mention of a calf, of a baby. She had stumbled across the family graveyard, and there were a couple of headstones for infants who had died, and she's like, oh wow, that really must be terrible. I can't imagine what it would be like to lose a child. But I just don't remember her making any other kind of comment. I don't know. Sometimes I do zone out because I tend to listen while I'm driving or whatever. And this one, I mean, it wasn't the most stimulating novel, so I could have missed it, but I was just like, okay. Every now and again, and in one particular instance, Jenny starts finding these little bars of pine soap on especially the girls' pillows. And she goes to Rooney. She's like, oh, did you do this? And Rooney's like, no. That was Caroline. And so now we're getting a little like ghosty supernatural element because we have been planting a lot of seeds about Caroline. And we're like, okay. And then there are a lot of Caroline sightings, which plays into something bigger later on. When you know it, Jenny discovers she's pregnant. She wants to tell Erich, but there's never quite the right time to tell Erich, specifically because Joe has a dog. They are hanging out with Joe and this dog, and the dog, it's like a puppy. It runs off and it winds up in the family cemetery, and Jenny, her first thought is, I hope he doesn't do anything to Caroline's grave. Of course, this dog is on Caroline's grave, and she looks and there's woods, and she sees Erich with his hunting rifle, and she's like, don't do it, don't shoot. And Erich shoots the dog. And then he comes closer, and then he shoots again. And she's like, why did you shoot that dog twice? He's like, to put it out of its misery. So yeah, we get this whole thing. We're like, why did he shoot the dog? Did he realize what was happening in the first place? Because he says he doesn't realize it was a dog, and then he does realize it was the dog, so he's going to shoot the dog to put it out of its misery. And then he does end up getting Joe a replacement dog. That incident, all these other little incidents, his increasingly controlling behavior, she's just not sure she wants to tell him that she's pregnant. And then, the midpoint of this novel, Sheriff shows up and says Kevin has gone missing. And he insinuates that Jenny had something to do with it because she had been seen with him at the restaurant. And of course, all of this stuff is coming out where she's like, well, Erich, did she know you were going to be out of town? Did you know that she was going to see Kevin? So it makes it look like she's hiding things. Obviously, she's like, I have not seen him since, but of course, somebody saw her with him. They saw her and her coat with him, and she's like, but I don't even have that coat. I think she'd given that coat to Joe's mom. No, she'd given that coat to Rooney. She's like, I don't even have that coat. A little later on, she ends up having a conversation with Joe's mom, and Joe's mom says, I saw you with him. And she's like, it wasn't me. And I think what Kevin had done was Kevin had actually stopped and asked for directions. So it wasn't that the mother had seen Jenny with Kevin, but that around the time Kevin had gone missing, he had stopped at their house to ask directions to Jenny's house. So this is putting him in the vicinity of Jenny. Jenny then goes to the sheriff and says, hey, look, he was seen going in this direction around that period of time. So sheriff goes in that general direction, searches for Kevin, finds Kevin's car in the river, and Jenny's coat is in the car. So obviously Jenny is their main suspect. Something eventually propels Jenny to reveal that she is pregnant, and Erich is super duper excited. He is gonna go out of town again, but not before he has a little yelling incident at Joe, because there's something that possibly could have been in Erich's prize horse's feed that could have poisoned this horse, and so he's yelling at Joe for Joe's carelessness. I have written down here that Mark's dad, who I think his name is Luke, warns Jenny about accidents. Frankly, I have no idea what that's in reference to. I don't know if that's in reference to her and things happening around her. I don't know if that's in reference to Caroline. I don't know if that's like a general reference, but it's a little bit more foreshadowing. It's a little bit more like, ooh, is something wrong with Erich? Like, should we be worried about Jenny? Well, wouldn't you know it, the horse goes crazy because somebody did poison his food with rat poison, and the horse starts to attack Joe. Mark shoots the horse, and Jenny is blamed because Jenny had been in the vicinity when Erich had been yelling at Joe about poisoning the oats. Therefore, Jenny knew what needed to be done. Jenny has a call with Joe. Joe tells Jenny, oh, it was after he'd kind of gotten trampled by the horse, because he is telling Jenny, hey, I saw you getting into that car with Kevin. And she's like, it wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, however long later it needed to happen, she gives birth to her baby. It was not an easy pregnancy. It was actually super difficult. And when she finally does give birth, so she had arranged with Erich to name this little baby boy after him. Keep it in the family line. Well, she wakes up, nurse, doctor, someone calls this baby Kevin. And she's like, Kevin? Kevin's not the dad. She looks at Erich and she's like, why did you name him Kevin? And he's like, well, he needed to be named after his father. So, yeah. Somewhere along the line, Erich got it into his head that she was having an affair with Kevin. As difficult as the pregnancy was, is kind of how difficult this infant's early days are. The baby has pneumonia or something. Jenny nurses him back to health, only for the next day the baby to have died. And over the course of a conversation, Tina, I think she points to a portrait of Caroline, and she's like, yeah, I saw that lady basically suffocate. She doesn't say that, but she like mimes suffocation. And now it's just like, well, if it wasn't Caroline, then it must have been Jenny. Then that ties back to the earlier instance, right when Jenny and the girls first got to Minnesota, where she saw all the infant graves and she couldn't fathom what it would be like to lose a child. Clark is doing smart things. It's just, it's kind of hard to see sometimes. Jenny requests that Kevin be buried with Caroline, but Erich refuses. He will not let her do it, which, I mean, I thought was interesting because there could have been all kinds of reasons. One, because he doesn't think that kid is his, so why would he let this kid be buried with his precious mother? Two, I mean, is he hiding something? Like, it really does go a long way to say no to this. I just wish, I don't know. We do get an answer eventually, but in the meantime, I wish we'd gotten a little bit more explanation as to why he might say no. Now Jenny has had it. She's like, I don't want to be here anymore. So she is plotting her escape. She's trying to figure out how to get money. She's got things together, and the perfect timing is Erich is going out of town for a show. A little bit of a spoiler here, perhaps. I don't know if half the time Erich goes out of town, he's actually going out of town. Whatever the case, he knows everything she's doing. So what she does to get money is she sells her grandmother's locket, but she has to take the car into town to do it. When Erich comes back from being out of town, he's kind of going on this tirade about how there's extra miles on the car, and he's like, because it's not like you went anywhere. So I don't know. I don't know how he figures these things out, but he knows. He knows that she is plotting to leave him. So he preempts her by kidnapping the kids. So she doesn't know that he's kidnapped the kids because she thinks he's just getting things ready in the car. And then all of a sudden they're gone. And then she calls about the hotel reservations she's made. And the guy, the concierge, is like, oh, well, your husband canceled them. So he has figured out every last move that she has made. And she has no idea where he's taken them. And he calls her and he says, here's the deal. You basically need to admit to killing Kevin Sr. and Kevin Jr. in order to get your kids back. So I need a written confession from you, and until I get that, you are not going to see your daughters. He also wants her to admit to attempting to murder Joe. That she needs to say that she should not be trusted with her daughters. Obviously, she's like, not happening. This is when we go back to that opening scene of her trying to find Erich's cabin. And what she finds there is truly horrific. One, all of these paintings that he had done were actually done by his mother. So his mother was a brilliant artist and not this hack that he and his father claimed she had been, and that all the paintings that he was selling, he had actually painted over her signature and put his own, which Jenny does get word that the buyers of these paintings are figuring that out. Like, they're having these paintings cleaned, and in that process they're discovering the original signature. So things are not going well in the art world for their newest star. In addition to her paintings, we find these truly psychotic depictions of all of the events from before, like when his mother died, to Arden, Rooney's daughter, who did not move to New York, but she was murdered. It is not clear why. The only thing we see is the painting is of her looking into the window of this cabin. We can only assume that she was murdered because she found this cabin and she found his paintings, so he had to murder her. But she was like his best friend. So this is why baby Kevin could not be buried with Caroline, because Erich had buried Arden in Caroline's grave. We have that. And then like we have him kind of in the background, so you know that he is the one who murdered her. And then we have, so biggest spoiler of all, Erich is the person that everybody has seen and attributed to being Jenny. He had a wig. He had taken Jenny's coat, so he was going around looking like her, doing all of these things. So we have him being the one who suffocated the baby. We have him as a child being the one who murdered his own mother because she was leaving him, because she recognized something was wrong with him. And then she had made his dad promise to get him help. I think she had wanted the dad to send him to some kind of institution. Obviously, it never happened, which is why the events of the book took place. So we see all these horrific scenes, and then we also see, in a little bit here, if you hadn't figured it out, Mark's dad, Luke, was in love with Caroline, and the insinuation is that the feelings were reciprocated. But we also have a depiction of the girls. But before I get into that, again, if you hadn't guessed, Erich was obsessed with his mother. He just had an unhealthy obsession with her from the get-go. Like, she would wake up with him standing over her in her bed. So yeah, she just knew he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and she was like, I gotta get out of here. Plus, his dad was not a good husband. He was an unhealthy, toxic husband. What Jenny does, she's like, I gotta get Erich out of hiding. I have to get him here so we can figure out where these girls are. Caroline had a distinctive cape. I believe it was a cape she was wearing in that portrait, Memory of Caroline. And there's this one place on the porch, I think it was a swing, that she would sit. So Jenny decides, let's put on this cape, let's sit on this swing, and Erich will come. She is right. Eventually, Erich does come, and he is just crazy, but it's, I don't know, it's kind of weird. I'm like, how did he snap? We don't really understand how he snapped. It is evident that he's not been okay, but what made him snap? Was it knowing that Jenny was gonna leave him? I don't know, but he's hysterical. He runs out of the woods. I forget if he was killed or if they just arrested him, but whatever the case, they cannot find these girls. They don't know where the girls are. So eventually, Rooney sees this painting, and she's like, why didn't you tell me about this earlier? Because the curtains in the painting, we had a passing mention of how she had made curtains for Caroline, and then I think the dad didn't like the color. There's something wrong with the color. So she had gone and given these curtains to somebody else. So she sees the curtains in the painting, and she's like, I know exactly where those curtains are. So they're able to rescue the girls who, because it was like freezing temperatures, this cabin had no heating, and the girls had actually been able to escape this cabin and were walking along the side of the road when they found them, so just in the nick of time. And wouldn't you know it, there's a happily ever after for Jenny, because the fact that she lived, but she and Mark are in love. We do get a couple of hints, like she not entirely comfortable with the idea of maybe Mark proposing to Emily. Maybe one or two instances where, their looks are just a little bit too lingering. They stand a little too close to each other. The vibes are there. But as far as the book goes, they have no real interactions. There's nothing that bonds them. They have no in-depth conversations. And I think kind of the very first time that they meet, you get something from Mark where he's like looking at her. But I don't know. I don't know how they're in love. Like before the book ends, like this, I don't know. I think this whole story took place, well, it was a year. Maybe not even a year, like 9 months. I mean, year from start to finish, but like, if she essentially got pregnant right after they got married, she and Mark fell in love in 9 months without any quality interaction. So, like, when you really strip it down to its essence, this is a good book, but it's very surface level. So that's when I say I like it, but it's not that good of a book. Anyways, this went way too long, so thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you again. Bye.